Have you ever thought to yourself, why am I progressively getting more angry, more frustrated, or does it feel like my stress bucket is filling up week after week after week? And in this video, what I want to share with you is something called the Zeigarnik effect. It's something that I realized was happening in my relationship, and I've seen it in so many clients' relationships. I want to explain it to you in the context of conflict with significant other business partners in your life, so you understand it and understand why it is filling your stress bucket and what you can do to eliminate it. So, welcome to the podcast. And in this podcast, I'm going to go through exactly what the Zeigarnik effect is and how you can use it to transform how you feel from day to day. Now, there's an experiment where they got people into a lab and they interrupted them. So they had 15 to 20 tasks to do. I can't remember the exact number. And maybe because I wasn't interrupted whilst I was doing this, they had the number of tasks to do. So they maybe took, imagine 10 people who were doing these 15 tasks, and another 10 people doing these 15 tasks, and they interrupted half of them. So 10 people, every single time they started the task, 50% of the way through the task, they were interrupted and told to go to the next task. The other 50%, what they let them do is just carry on and finish the task. At the end of the experiment, guess who remembered more of what they had done? It was the people who had been interrupted. Now, here's the problem, is that so many of the times that we have conflict in our relationships, in our interpersonal relationships, in our business relationships, in work, is that we have conflict, we don't process it, get to the wisdom, and let the wisdom inform us so we can move through something. And that was why at the age of 27, I felt angry, pissed off, rageful, like my stress bucket was just filling up week on week, month on month, and year on year, to the point where I was stood in the shower one day, my head against the glass, a pounding headache, so angry, so annoyed, so frustrated that I had to go to therapy. I was like, I need to go and get a therapist. Went on a men's retreat, learned so much about conflict and all this sort of stuff, right? So, and this is why it's important for you, is that if you are in a relationship, whether that's any relationship in your life, where you're never really getting past the conflict phase into resolution and wisdom, you're going to be filling up your stress bucket. And here's why. If we go back to that experiment, the people who were interrupted and told to go to the next task, at the end of the experiment, they were asked to recall what order, what task do they do, and they were able, I think it's something ridiculous, like 50 to 90% higher accuracy of recall than the people who were able to just do the task and process and move on to the next one. And what happens is that every time we have a conflict and we don't get into resolution, it sits in our psyche, it sits in our body. And if you think about this, it sits within us, and it doesn't allow us to process. And I can think about so many of the clients I've worked with and my examples in my own life where when I haven't been able to move through conflict to a place of resolution, I've just felt like my stress bucket's been creeping up and creeping up and creeping up, and I've been more pissed off, more resentful, less logical, less likely to have conflict because there's so much frustration within inside me. It's a self-perpetuating problem that's what has led to breakdown. For me, it was an emotional breakdown. I just like, enough is enough. It was a physical breakdown. I had a headache, I had a tight jaw. I was angry all the time. And I needed to make a change to be able to go and do that. And this is where I want to help you and give you some pragmatic ways to go and do this. So first and foremost, we've got to realize what is our model for conflict. Like, are we somebody who would do anything other than have conflict? We'll do anything than wade into conflict with a partner because it's not safe. We don't know how to have conflict. Maybe our partner is volatile and they don't seem to want to have it. Maybe it's that the stakes are really high and you feel that if you were to have a conflict, there would be some sort of real negative outcome for this. And They were all the ones for me, by the way, and so many for my clients as well. And here's what helped me is that I realized from listening to another man that conflict was safe. Conflict was safe, but conflict was the route to peace. Let me say that again, because I think that if you're listening to this, conflict is the route to peace. Now, I believed that pushing things under the carpet was the route to peace. That was my model for conflict. Like, push enough stuff under the rug and then it'll eventually go away with time. And the problem is the rug is your body, and you pile up all of these resents and this pain of conflict not being resolved because you haven't processed it. And so what I do believe has to happen is you have to change the way that you see conflict. Conflict is the route to peace. Like, if I go into conflict, I resolve things, I get clear on where I was wrong or where I was, right. It's not really a case of being right and wrong. It's more like, where can I help someone move through this problem? And then we can work on the wisdom. And this is something that's profoundly changed in my own relationship since I worked on it probably just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was like, actually, do you know what? I had the model of conflict where we'd have the disagreement, we'd fall out, we would make up, but we wouldn't use what we fell out about, and there would be no change in behavior. So we were having these perpetual conflicts that kept on coming up and not being dealt with. And it was frustrating as hell. And I just realized that. So I actually hired myself a coach, and I was like, do you know what? I need to work on my own stuff here. The stuff I help clients with, I had to, help have my, what's it called, drink my own Kool-Aid. And it was really helpful having someone work with me on this stuff. So the first frame is starting to see conflict as a route to peace. The second thing is identifying how we, what I say, wade into conflict. Now, this is something that is helpful for you if you've not got any good modeling for conflict. My model for argument and conflict was from my parents, and my parents it was anger, frustration, violence, and breakdown. They were the models. I'd seen that happen in my childhood. So my psycho, my subconscious was saying, don't go into this conflict. One of those four things could happen. It's not safe. And that's not the case, right? As adults, we have way more control over that. So I went and learned some frameworks that would really help me walk into these high stakes, high emotional, high risk conversations and make them way safer. And the first one, I'm going to teach you one thing today, which is going to help you walk into a hard conversation, is state your intention for the conversation. That is the most important thing you can do going into a hard conversation, into conflict. Hey, the reason I want to have this conversation is I want to be closer to you. I want to connect with you. I want to spend my future with you. I want this business to last. I want us to make more money together. I want us to go deeper in our relationship. I want to understand where you're coming from. They're all frames that you can use for going into those kind of conflicts. And when someone really knows your intention, because the most threatening text you can ever have from your partner sometimes is, we need to have a conversation. We need to talk. And you see those text messages, you see that, and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You get worried, you get anxious, you get fearful. And then when they say the thing that they want from the conversation, it settles you down. Well, we want to shrink that gap as small as possible. Hey, I want to have a conversation because I want to connect with you. I want to go deeper with you. It helps them stay out of worry, concern. And also we're helping them with their state, because if they lose their state in our conversation, we might be in our logical, creative brain, but they're in their emotional, irrational, illogical brain. So there's no safety. So that's state your reason or intention for the conversation, create safety. Then what we want to do is we want to look at the data. We want to keep it to facts, not opinions. So look at the data. And this is really helpful when it comes to conflict. Instead of saying you're always late, saying you were late 3 times over the last month, that's fact versus opinion. You're always late. We want to avoid absolutes. And this is the thing that I've noticed, especially in conflict, is that getting on the side of the person that you're working with, instead of being you versus them, like when I'm coaching sometimes, I'll even turn my shoulder. It's like you versus them. It's you and them versus the problem. Hey, could be a staff member. Hey, Mary, listen, like, here's the problem. If you're watching this as a video, you'll see me pointing over towards the wall. Is that, hey, here's the problem. Over the last three weeks, you've been late 3 times. This is the problem. How do we solve this together? Is that a fact? Can we just agree that's a fact? Let's work on this together. Versus this confrontational, you are late. It makes it about self versus behavior. And when we can get on side, we can navigate conflict way, way easier. And here's the thing is, like, when we, I can do a whole training on conflict and hard conversations. That's something I'm really, really good at doing. And I can help you. Just put the word hard conversations in the comments and I'll send you over training on that. But what I think is really, really helpful is getting to the point where we've got some kind of resolution. And this is the problem I found in my own life, and I can see with clients that never get to that point of resolution and wisdom. And if you are somebody who is never getting to that resolution and wisdom, it's going to be piling up in your stress bucket. Now, the biggest problem I find with especially high performing people, leaders, is that work sometimes can be stressful. There's a lot of stressors in work, and they're not having the hard conversations in their home life. Now, the way that a marital conflict, a relationship conflict with your wife or your husband, your partner, the way that weighs on you like no other, it can fill your stress bucket 80% of the way up with one particular altercation. And then you've got so little bandwidth for all of those other challenges and hard conversations that you have, that when you're fighting with your partner, it's just one client or one co-worker that says something and it blows the top over and you overflow that. Why, of course, the stress bucket overflows and you lose your rag, or you lose your cool, or you're kind of just overwhelmed. We want to try and work on especially marital and relational conflicts, so we've got so much more capacity to deal with the things that we're dealing with in leadership in the rest of our life. So we want to get good at working through those stages where things are getting out of hand. There's a conflict on the horizon. You walk into it sooner rather than later. You don't let it fester. You make it safe. You have the conversation. You get to some sort of kind of resolution or wisdom, and then it allows it to just flow out the bucket. It taps out the bucket. And I was explaining this to a client the other day. Sometimes we want to see stress as a bucket. We want to see what's filling the bucket and what's emptying the bucket. Well, conflict is filling the bucket, knowing that you have to have hard conversations, marital conflict, tough, high stakes conversations. They fill your stress bucket. They are stresses. But what we've got to get good at doing is applying taps. And this process where you can walk into, have a good conversation, get to the wisdom, and then move on allows that stress to come out. So then we got that nice flow going. If we don't have that process in place, the bucket fills, you become overwhelmed, you become anxious, depressed, frustrated, you get all those symptoms of high stress. And that's not where we want to lead from. We want to lead from a place where we've got lots of bandwidth to deal with the stresses that come our way. So hopefully that thinking, that analogy, and some of the tips I've given you will help you with that. If hard conversations is something you struggle with in leadership, it's 2 things you can do. I'm going to be doing way more on the podcast, on the channel, but think about what is the one conversation I have to have this week, today, and just take 1% steps towards it. Whether that's sending a text message saying, this is my intent for a conversation we need to have this week or today. And the other thing is reach out for help, because I can help you with this stuff as well. So all you need to do is write the word hard conversations in the comments. I'll shoot you a training which literally end to end gives you a framework for having better tough conversations. Hopefully what was the actual effect called? What's it called? The Zeigarnik effect. And this training has helped you see how holding on to these is filling your bucket. Thanks for watching. Give us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, or leave us a comment if there's something that's really resonated with you from what you've heard over the last couple of minutes. Take care.